All right, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your gracious host, Richie Mars, and I have a very special guest with me today. He is a veteran of wrestling fandom. He is very intelligent when it comes to wrestling. He knows his stuff. It's my good friend Seth. Seth, how we doing?
Hey Rich, how you doing? Good to be here.
In today's topic, I feel like both of us can bring different perspectives on, which is why I wanted to do it. It's the Undertaker streak because the streak goes back towards the 90s and it went from 90s to all the way to 2014. If you were a wrestling fan, this is probably a big part of it because every year WrestleMania comes around, the discussion goes, who is the Undertaker facing? Who is going to break the streak? Is the streak ever going to be broken? Things like that. But before we get underway with that, give us a little cliff note version of your fandom and where you are with it presently.
Thanks, Rich. So yeah, I mean, listen, I've been a fan since I was a little kid. I remember going to Madison Square Garden and Nassau Coliseum with my dad. Every month, more to Coliseum, and then but we would watch the MSG shows, at home because they used to have them on the MSG network. You think back to the Undertaker, and I think for me that the craziest thing is that he almost spans almost the majority of the majority of my life. I mean, here's a guy who, just thinking about him. What did we say just now? Was goes from the '90s, and I think that was Survivor Series of 1990. So I'm a 14-year-old kid there. And here I am at 46 years old, and we're still talking about the Undertaker all these years later. So you know, I still try, I still watch Raw every week, even the episodes that some people may not love, I still find something enjoyable with them. I travel out to WrestleMania every year, regardless of where it is. So, you know, the fandom is still there. I think, opportunities like this to talk about, some of the key moments, are pretty cool.
Just for a quick side note, when The Undertaker debuted in WWE, I wasn't even born yet. So, this is where you're going to get the two different perspectives of The Undertaker and the career of The Undertaker. And when you're just getting into wrestling fandom, or if you don't know wrestling in general, or just know the like bits and pieces, people always seem to know about The Undertaker. And with you going to several WrestleManias and seeing Undertaker live in person, what is it like being in that atmosphere when The Undertaker is in for a WrestleMania match?
You can't compare it. I mean, I think last year was the Hall of Fame and year. But I mean, we're in the middle of night one, and they stop. They do the Hall of Fame introductions, and that place was clamoring for the Undertaker from the moment they started the Hall of Fame part. And once the lights went off, I mean, that place, you could feel it vibrating. The floor was shaking, and everyone cheering Undertaker. It's whether you're a wrestling fan, a casual wrestling fan, or a wrestling fan who follows it religiously like we do, everybody knows the Undertaker. You turn on the TV, whether it's his documentary specials, or everybody knows the Undertaker, which is amazing.
I always thought of Undertaker as this big conscious figure character of wrestling, of WWE. And as time went on, it seemed more and more he became like this mythical being, this conscience of this is what WWE is all about, unraveled into one singular being. What is the Undertaker for you?
It was funny when he first started. I didn't know what to make of him. Like I said, I'm a young kid. I'm 13, 14 years old. Actually 14 years old at this point. And of course, this is the days of WWE where it was still WWF, and you had all the characters and everything. And you have this guy, and I'm just like, dude, he's destroyed everybody. And even when he won the title from Hogan, a year in, to me, it wasn't until that face turn with against Jake Roberts, you start to see a little bit more personality from him. Because I mean, at first it was this stoic beast, of a man with Paul Bearer, and little by little we started to see the Undertaker evolve, and then we get to the feud with Kane. You really get to see that that character of the Undertaker, the family dynamic with his brother and Paul Bearer's involvement in it. I was a big fan of the American Badass. I'm not gonna lie, but I think that's to me where he became that conscience of the WWE, that that locker room presence, that guy who when he comes out, you don't mess with him. Like I think that was for me the American Badass in him, and then when he went back to the Undertaker at WrestleMania 20, at that point when he basically combines them both, becomes that mythical presence and the conscience of the company all at once.
Now, you mentioned the streak matches with Kane, which are undeniably probably the turnaround for the WrestleMania streaks in general. The match quality really begins to pick up towards probably WrestleMania 21, 23, around that era. Do you think the match with Kane, the first go around, was the one that kind of defined the streak, or was there other matches that you thought kind of defined it?
I don't know if the Undertaker and Kane, that first one, just defined the streak. I mean, I think, and we were talking about this earlier. I mean, as a younger kid, I don't even think I was even really aware that there was a streak at the beginning. Just
Mhm.
so much as the fact that the Undertaker isn't, you don't beat him. I don't think it was till he was maybe, it was after his 10th victory that we started paying attention to the streak. But I definitely, that first match with Kane, I think was the first credible opponent that, you know, could have taken him down. When Kane first came out, I mean, he was just as unbeatable as his brother.
For a long time, the Undertaker's opponents were his size. That was pretty much the dichotomy that WrestleMania, before that Ric Flair match, in a lot of regards, it was always built around the guys who are either bigger than Undertaker or trying to take him down mentally. But when we get towards Triple H the first go around, Ric Flair, then it became, okay, who of the workers are Undertaker going to face off?
Oh yeah.
How did you like the dichotomy between kind of like this first half of the streak where it was more the character Undertaker, and then as we progress it became more about Undertaker the worker?
Just going and looking at some of those first matches, I mean, Undertaker versus Snuka, I don't think anyone gave Snuka a chance, right?
Hmm.
Jake Roberts, Giant Gonzalez, I think Bundy's in there too. I almost feel like those first few matches, like you said, I think they're just more of just big guys clashing, or even guys that just were in there, like Snuka. He wasn't. So I wouldn't consider Snuka at that point in his life a bigger guy. That first one with Triple H at WrestleMania 17 in Houston. Out of all the matches with Triple H, that actually might have been my favorite one. I just love when Undertaker picks him up for the last ride, and Triple H, hits him with the it was a chain he hits him
It
with.
was the sledgehammer.
Yeah, the sledgehammer hits him. They go down. You're like, you're like, dude, this this is a fabulous match.
Hmm.
And I think that was probably the first of just the really good matches. And then afterwards, I mean, you had the Flair match, which was great. And I mean, Flair at that point, I mean, Flair wasn't out there to impress anybody with his with his matches, and yet Undertaker probably at that point got the best match out of Flair in his run with the company than anyone at that to that point probably did.
Hmm.
Randy Orton, I know, is in there. Batista, Edge, the two with Shawn Michaels, two more with Triple H. 100% what you said, that we went from just the big guys clashing to just the workers who brought out the best with the Undertaker, and vice versa. I think the Undertaker brought out the best in these guys too.
Now, an interesting thing that was shown in the second round of the Broken Skull sessions with the Undertaker and Steve Austin, Taker mentioned that Vince gave him an option of either RVD or Flair. And right before Vince even said Flair, Taker said, I want to work with Flair. How different do you think the streak would have been if the 10th victory was Rob Van Dam as opposed to Ric Flair?
I never thought about that. So this is the very beginning of it then for Rob Van Dam, who's going to go on to do great things. But I think, for many people, not everybody, but for many people, I think RVD is still, linked as an ECW guy at this point. Whereas, Ric Flair is the legendary Ric Flair. And that's not saying anything, I think, negative towards Rob Van Dam. I just think Ric Flair at this point, I mean, he hasn't retired yet. He's still the world champion to me at this point, and he's I think it's probably the most credible victory for the Undertaker to this point. Dude, you could even link Ric Flair and the Undertaker. Go back to the Undertaker's first championship against Hulk Hogan. Who was the one who slid the chair into the ring? It was the Nature Boy.
Once we get to WrestleMania 20, from 20 onwards is this incredible, no pun intended, streak of matches that
Hmm.
the Undertaker has, and that starts with Kane. I don't think it's better than his first one
No,
with Kane,
I think the first
just
one was the
because it
best.
was a reintroduction, a
Yeah,
reunion tour of the Dead Man character,
true.
and this was now kind
And it
of
wasn't it,
establishing in the back.
and it wasn't the same Kane either. This was already Kane unmasked. So it was
Hmm.
a different Kane, a different Undertaker. Their first match, I think, definitely was much better.
Hmm. And you get the young upstart in Randy Orton for the next
Mhm.
one, and
Mark Henry.
Mark Henry. And I just want to stay on Orton for a bit because Orton
Okay.
has accomplished so much at this point
Oh
with
yeah.
him being the legend killer. Did you think Randy Orton being the legend killer and facing Undertaker at WrestleMania, did you think that was the first time where the streak was necessarily in trouble once it was in your mind that the streak was established, or did you think the streak still had mileage on it?
No, I listen. I mean, this is Randy Orton, legend killer. I mean, what better way for his character to grow as the legend killer than to kill the legend of the Undertaker? So I 100% to that points that Randy Orton may be beating the streak. His dad was there, Cowboy Bob was there in his corner. I mean, they had everything there for you to think that Randy was going to take it. But I don't think Randy. I mean, this is a whole other episode. But I don't think Randy was ready for that either.
I think Randy would tell you that Randy wasn't ready for that.
Right. I think Randy does say Randy wasn't ready. You know, in Broken Skull session, I think he said that too.
Another thing that I don't think us fans, while the streak was intact, think about is the pressure that comes with the person that breaks the streak. And you could be the young guy who breaks the streak, but what happens after that? Because you
Oh,
accomplished arguably the greatest achievement in WWE history. You could win or lose WWE World Championships. There's only one time the streak gets broken. And to put that on a young guy at the time who was 25 years old,
yeah.
like on the one hand, it's a great way to make a star. On the other hand, if the star doesn't ascend to heights that are at least comparable to the streak, that could be detrimental to a career and a wasted opportunity for the streak.
Oh, sure, 100%. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this later on when we talk about the end of the streak. But I remember when the streak was broken, and you listen to other podcasts, and people are like, "I can't believe it was Brock who beat the Undertaker," and should have gone to a young guy, passed the baton. But like you just said, the person has to be the right person. I don't know. I can't think of too many 25-year-old kids that in general that could handle that, let alone some of these guys that actually have to go and do it with the pressure. WrestleMania. Forget about just performing in front of the crowds every night, but WrestleMania, which has grows every year with the amount of people in attendance, the amount of eyes on you, that the streak as it will become its own entity. That's stressful. Stressful just thinking about it.
Who did you think would have been acceptable people to break the streak at one time if the streak should have ever been broken? Because you had a long line of guys who I don't want to say necessarily made, because you had Cena, you
Hmm.
had Randy took a little bit longer. Batista was kind of in and out in a couple of years. You had veterans like Shawn and Hunter. You had Brock come back. And then, as we'll know in the future, you'll have the Shield guys who are kind of made men
Hmm.
currently. Was there anybody on the roster that you could kind of look back on and say, that guy should be in consideration to break the streak?
Well, it's funny too. a lot of the guys you just mentioned are from that famed OVW class of 2002,
Yeah,
right? Which is probably the greatest OVW class that there is. You brought up should the streak have ever have been broken, and you know, I can make an argument on both sides of it. I could say no, it
I
shouldn't.
agree.
It should have been something that just lasts in history as the one undefeated streak.
Hmm.
On the other hand, at some point in history, everybody gives back to the business and builds the new stars. I mean, even Andre at some point passed the baton. Went from being undefeated his whole, all those years, 15 years, I think, going into WrestleMania 3, and and then he laid down for Hogan, and once he passed the baton to Hogan, I mean, he was at the end of his career. I mean, the Ultimate Warrior was running circles around him at that point too. A couple of years later. So, I mean, you can make arguments for both sides, but I think that the streak, if the streak today was an undefeated Undertaker go down in history as a only person ever to have a 22-0 streak, I would have been okay with it.
And that's another thing that makes the streak being broken a little bit jarring because it didn't happen at the end of the Undertaker's WrestleMania run. It happened close to the end, but the Undertaker still competed in about 4 or 5 WrestleManias after that.
Well, and that's what makes you wonder. That's what I was going to say before. I mean, do you think they thought maybe that Brock match was going to be his last match? I mean, he was pretty banged up after that one too.
It's
You know,
funny
you,
that you say that because this was Vince's argument when he found Undertaker and gonna say Brock's gonna beat you for the streak. He said if Brock doesn't beat you, who will? So Vince pretty much had it in his mind that the streak was gonna get broken eventually. And he thought Brock was the right guy to do it because at this point in Brock Lesnar's career, he wasn't always Suplex City. It was very hot and cold when it came to Brock because Cena beat him on the first match back, and then Triple H beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania
hmm
the year before. So Brock was not this unstoppable monster yet. It's almost like they couldn't figure out how to book a part-time guy. They've gotten better over the years once they had more part-timers, but
it wasn't until Brock destroyed John Cena at
mhm,
SummerSlam with Suplex City that all of a sudden he became Suplex City.
because of that victory over the Undertaker, Brock got that aura back of
Yes,
mystique, and he almost became the new age Undertaker for a new generation of fans. And
correct.
that's why I think Brock's victory over the Undertaker helped him so much. Would it be benefit if you gave it to a guy like Roman? Absolutely. But it would have helped the Roman character now, but back then I don't think it would have done
No,
nearly enough.
I mean, look at what it did. So, I mean, if you go back to the Monday Night Raw after that WrestleMania, when Roman comes out and as pretty much essentially says, "This is my yard now," guy got booed out of the building.
Mhm.
You know, and that wasn't even the Undertaker's first loss, right? That was Undertaker's second loss, and I think they did a great job of using that to build towards a Brock and Roman feud as the two guys to beat the Undertaker. But I don't think the effect of being the first person to end the streak or the only person to end the streak, I don't think it would have had the same effect on Roman as it did with Brock. I think you're 100% correct. Brock got his aura back, and the people back, were already hating on Roman Reigns as it was. There was no denying Roman was the guy at that point.
Mhm.
But I don't think beating the Undertaker would have done anything different for his career.
And think about this. Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, their rivalry, a part of that was they were the only two guys to beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And what other federation, company, fight league, what have you, has a rivalry based on two guys beating the same guy at the same event?
And be the only two people to do it.
It just goes to show how much The Undertaker at WrestleMania and the streak in general
hmm
encapsulated all these guys. And the streak was so huge that arguably the match that people were most looking forward to was the streak match and not the championship match, which was always the case with the Royal Rumble winner and
Yeah.
going on last.
I mean, right? I mean, Undertaker and Roman Reigns, that closed out the show,
Hmm.
right? I mean, for more or less, I mean, it was the Undertaker's last match. Was good at the time going to be his last match. I mean, the Cena one and the AJ Styles one will cinematic one will follow, but you know, Undertaker and Bray, that was towards the end of the card.
Hmm.
More for the
The
fact, I think, though, that they needed it to be darker outside for his entrance.
the
Um,
the Shawn Michaels retirement match was the last one on the
that
show.
was that closed it out. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I was gonna say, and I think the Hell in the Cell with Triple H was like second to last.
Did you think the streak got so huge it was taking the luster off the championship matches that should as well be presented as the main focus of the show?
I think so. I think so. I mean, like I said, I mean, you look at some of these WrestleManias. I mean, I know my WrestleManias. You know your WrestleManias,
Hmm.
but could the casual fan, if we gave them a WrestleMania number and we told them this was, for instance, if you go Undertaker and Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 30, does the casual wrestling fan even know or remember what the main event was?
That was a pretty memorable one with Brian.
Well, yeah, okay, so yeah, they know Daniel Bryan wins, but do they remember who he's in there with?
Fair point. Yeah.
But everybody remembers Brock Lesnar and the Undertaker, and what's the graphic for that WrestleMania? It's that is the fan, is like with this with all the jaws dropped.
I don't think we'll ever get a moment as shocking as the streak getting broken.
Oh yeah,
After a while, it became almost like a foregone conclusion that the Undertaker
was going to
wins.
win. I remember, so I remember that vividly. Those were the years where I got together with my same group of friends every year that we would watch WrestleMania at my house every year. It was the same group of friends that I probably was watching WrestleMania with for the last 10 years or more. And I remember when that happened, we all looked at each other like, did that just happen? You know, did that seriously just happen? And we said the same thing. Wait, was that a mistake? Like Brock just beat the Undertaker cleanly? I mean, look at around the crowd. People like, jaws are dropped. Paul Heyman did a great job of playing it up. It was phenomenal. I mean, it was, imagine if gets leaked and our good friend on his dirt sheet report puts out before WrestleMania that, oh yeah, and the Undertaker is probably going to lose. That takes away from it all. Just that aura of the Undertaker you were talking about before. I mean, that mystique, that fact that none of us ever thought that streak was getting broken, but yet we tuned in every year anyway to see who was going to go in. I mean, I don't think anybody thought Brock Lesnar was walking out victorious that night, but imagine if the dirt sheets had ruined it for you. Went to me, it would have killed that whole moment.
After that end of an era match with Triple H, the Hell in a Cell with Shawn Michaels as the guest referee. After that, the it felt like they were struggling with how to book the streak or
Oh
how
yeah.
to propose the streak because I remember the CM Punk match, and the reason why CM Punk faced the Undertaker is he won a Fatal 4-Way qualifying match. I remember this vividly. It was like an old school Raw. It was CM Punk versus Randy Orton versus Sheamus versus Big Show, and CM Punk won. And congratulations, you faced the Undertaker. But to start the feud like that, you qualify to face this person at WrestleMania, the chance to break the streak. I never saw the streak as something like, oh, it's a golden ticket that you could possibly enrich your name in history. It's either a personal thing with The Undertaker, and even the year after with Brock Lesnar, where Brock Lesnar had like an open contract and Taker signed it.
Mm-hmm.
And after the fact,
Didn't he sign it in blood, if I remember correctly?
he stabbed Brock's hand,
Mm-hmm.
then chokeslammed him, then signed it.
In blood, yes.
So after a while, it becomes a struggle almost every year to make the streak creative.
It just became a thing where, just what you were just saying, where were you booking it to book it, or you just booking it like they were booking it like a championship? Like, I won a fatal 4-way. and the championship I'm going after is the streak now. I like what they did with it. I like how they invoked, Paul Bearer into the story and the urn, and Paul Heyman steals the urn, and they make that whole that to me should have been the done from the beginning. I don't think they should have had that fatal four way to begin with. I think it should have just been, you know, here comes CM Punk, who was, angry and bitter that The Rock had taken his championship at the time. If you
Mhm.
remember, he had lost it at Royal Rumble,
Yep.
and here's CM Punk, you know, part time Rock, is your champion, and now, 400 and something days as champion, and I should be the main event of WrestleMania. I mean, that should have been his catalyst right there, just to go and steal the urn, just to,
Right, absolutely.
you know,
Even without, like, hypothetically speaking, without Paul Bearer's death,
yeah.
like
Listen,
that is
how else?
enough reason alone to
How else
do
are you
it.
getting into a featured match in WrestleMania? Well, I'm going to get myself into the most featured of matches. I'm getting into the streak.
Yeah, he did. I think the person who actually made that match got fired, if I remember correctly. Like, because I remember a big story of the person who made that match or suggested that match or pitched that match got fired, and I'm like, yeah, rightfully so.
Yeah. Not, not a very good booking decision, but I mean, there's so many better ways you could have done that.
Now, when you mentioned Bray, and Bray is sort of, they're trying to make him that spooky character on the
Hmm.
show currently. Now, Taker already lost to Brock the year before. Did
Hmm.
you think Bray should have went over in this match in this instance? Because the pressure's pretty much off. Taker
Yes.
already won it, or already lost his streak. Do you
Uh,
think
yeah,
now
I'll
it's
be
the time?
honest. I thought at the time that they were at that point now going to use the Undertaker just to build the new stars, because at this point now the Undertaker is, he's solid. I mean, his legacy is there. He can go out for the next 3 years and lose at WrestleMania. It's not going to affect his legacy, but at the same time, you would be building these new stars. If Bray goes over, it would have been 2 years back to back. Brock, Bray, Undertaker goes over Shane, and then you're at Roman. I mean, three losses in 4 years. Could they have done that? I think they could. I think so, and I don't think it would have affected his legacy one way or the other.
Now we talked about the bad fatal four way with CM Punk and him getting the shot at the Undertaker. What is the worst the streak has given us?
When you say, what do you mean, like worst matches or worst moment?
Worst match, worst opponent, worst story.
I mean, could we go all the way back to Giant Gonzalez?
Absolutely, we can.
I mean, I so Rich, I don't know, were you even alive at that point? WrestleMania 9?
No, I was born
Okay.
the year after.
So if you go back to the early to mid 90s, before he was Giant Gonzalez, he was El Gigante in WCW. And he was, they were building him up to be, pretty big star. I mean, he was, you know, I mean, it's also WCW in the early '90s too. Keep that in mind. They didn't, other than Sting, they didn't have too many homegrown stars at that point. Sting and Luger, it was probably their two homegrown stars. And then Elegante comes to WWF. They convert him to Giant Gonzalez in this big leotard where he's supposed, basically he's got fur in his crotch and on his shoulders. So he's supposed to be some big, you know, behemoth, caveman.
Very goofy,
Yes.
very 90s esque,
Yes.
very
I mean,
pre generation era.
yes. I mean, there wasn't much to that match other than the Undertaker's entrance, where he's got the crow with him, on the back of his,
That was a great entrance too.
yeah, that WrestleMania 9 entrance is pretty cool, which, again, he's got the crow with him. And that was even, years before Sting went and took the crow moniker. So, I mean, that could have been used though. Could we ask the question, should we ever have gotten the Sting and Undertaker match, and where would we have put it?
In terms of WrestleMania,
Yeah, like where would we have put that match? I mean, obviously Sting didn't officially come in till WrestleMania, 31. I mean, that, you know, could we have gone with Sting and the Undertaker that year instead of Triple H and Sting and Bray and the Undertaker? Could have, I think that would have been the year to do it.
so there were a bunch of rumors where it was WrestleMania 27 and Sting's contract with Impact was up.
Correct. I've read.
And they were doing these cryptic vignettes of the date of a Monday Night Raw, and people thought, "Oh, it's Sting," and then the Undertaker appears, and that was the same Raw where Triple H confronted the Undertaker. They look at each other, they do the
Correct.
WrestleMania thing. I think WrestleMania 27, that would probably be the best place and time for that Undertaker Sting match, because Sting was at a place where he was young enough. The Undertaker was at a place where they're both at the tail end, and I think that would have been a solid way for one Sting to get back into the debut in the WWE, and for Undertaker to kind of get off into the sunset, possibly with that big dream match that everybody's been having with WCW and WWE. Because when you think WCW versus WWE, you think Sting, Undertaker right away.
WCW crumbled and all the guys came in. The one guy that we were waiting for that we never got was Sting.
Hmm.
We got everyone else. We got everyone else pretty much. We got Booker T. We got Scott Steiner. We even got the NWO. We even got Eric Bischoff.
Yeah.
We got Flair. The only guy we never got was Sting. I mean, and he'll tell you he was, you listen to his interviews. He was nervous about how he was going to be booked. And I think if I remember correctly, I think it was a conversation he had with Hunter at like a Comic Con in San Diego is when they first got the ball rolling on bringing him in, right? He was doing like a joint signing with Hulk Hogan, and I think that's where they sat down and started talking, or was maybe even Hogan brought the idea up, but
Yeah, and Sting coming into WWE, not getting too off topic, but Sting coming into WWE would have been a big deal at that
heck yeah,
time. And
I think
I
so.
think the reservation is Sting is one of those guys when the Attitude Era kind of came in, he would have been over regardless, but you're not sure how he's going to react to it. It's kind of like Bret Hart when the Attitude
Well,
Era was starting. You can't really put Bret into WWE attitude.
but I could see Sting being nervous, at that point, in those days to not want to see his character get changed.
When you go to from another company to WWE, they want to put
Yeah.
their brand on you. They want to put their stamp on you. And when the first Booker T promo with The Rock and The Rock says, "Who are you?" It does bring that reservations for somebody newly coming in. And now I think we're at a point where they're a lot better with stuff when other people come in. I'm looking at the presentation of Cody.
Yeah. Dude,
Basically the
Cody
same he was in AEW.
brought in his own theme song too. I mean,
Yeah.
everything. The same price. He walked out as the AEW Indies Cody, and not as the Stardust Randy Orton lackey Cody. You know,
Right.
the entire arena. And again, I was there last year when that lights went out. Everyone's like, you know, people around me were like, it's gonna be Cody, and I'll be honest, I didn't think it was gonna be Cody.
Hmm.
I really thought they were saving Cody for the Raw after Mania.
Did you think it was going to be Taker? Because he did tease the night
I
before.
did. I'll be honest. I was leaning more towards American Badass Taker, and when the
Hmm.
lights went off, I was like, oh, it's gonna be Taker. And people around me like, it's gonna be Cody. I'm like, and you could hear like on my phone on the recording when I'm recording it, you hear me saying, not gonna be Cody. Don't get your hopes up. And all of a sudden it's Cody. I'm like, holy cow, damn. And that place went nuts, and everybody recognized, the graphic. I can't say everybody recognized the song, but
Hmm.
when the graphic came up, that place went nuts. I think if things were different in that WrestleMania 27 time period, yeah, I agree. That would definitely you bring in the Sting at the height of the end of his career, whereas not like when he finally did come in 4 years later and he was, a little older, less, and listen, that match with Triple H was great. But at the time for WrestleMania 31, you got a better match, two better matches actually. I can't say you would have gotten such a great match. And like you said, I don't know if it would have, Sting and the Taker match. If it happens, does it not live up to everyone's hopes? And it may not have. But 27, it definitely would have.
And speaking of opponents that the Taker never faced at WrestleMania, who do you think that, other than Sting, would have been a person that would be a part of the Undertaker's streak, or who would be somebody who would be able to break the streak? I've always thought at WrestleMania 22, people were saying, "Oh, it was going to be Shawn Michaels versus Eddie Guerrero," but I was thinking, because I looked back and I looked at books and a live event in the fall and during the tours, it was Undertaker versus Eddie Guerrero. And I said,
Hmm.
what if the plan would have been Eddie Guerrero and The Undertaker with Mark Henry as Eddie Guerrero's backup? Because Eddie Guerrero was going to turn on Batista eventually, and then Mark Henry would be Eddie's big muscle. I think that would have been a phenomenal match
Whew.
for the streak. And throwing another name in there, Kurt Angle would have been a great name for The Undertaker to face at WrestleMania. We had No Way Out 2006, which was a phenomenal match, but
Hmm.
I think WrestleMania would also be a very good place for them to have their face off.
I was thinking when you first asked the question, Kurt Angle was the one that immediately came to my mind. I
Hmm.
love the Eddie Guerrero answer. Um, there's so many guys. Like when you just think of, when you first asked that question, I was like, all right, well, how far back are we going? You
We're
know,
going back as far as the
as
Undertaker's
far as we
career.
want. I mean,
Yeah,
so I mean, you could look at any time period and say, all right, well, who are the biggest stars of those time period? I mean, I don't think anyone's going to say, those first couple of streak matches, Undertaker wasn't in there with the biggest of stars. But at the same time, Undertaker wasn't the biggest of stars yet himself. Kurt Angle and the Undertaker would have lit it up. I mean, at WrestleMania. I mean, the matches they had in 2000, for the championship, were great. I mean, those would have been phenomenal matches. The other person I was thinking of, not around anymore, but if you remember how big Umaga was,
ooh, that's a good one.
Umaga, yeah, Umaga. We never got to see. That would have been a great WrestleMania match because there would have been believability in Umaga as taking out the streak because he was taking out everybody.
Yeah,
Bobby Lashley, at that point in history too. I mean, Bobby Lashley was the one used to beat Umaga, so naturally Bobby Lashley would have been a credible opponent. I think that we never got to see at that point either.
Umaga probably one of the most underrated big men
Heck yeah.
for a time, and it's a shame that he passed away when he did before he could achieve such greatness. I'm going to throw out another name that apparently was on the docket for the Undertaker streak, and this is confirmed by Bruce Pritchard. So take it with a grain of salt if you want. The Monster Abyss was going to be the Undertaker's opponent at WrestleMania 22, but Abyss decided to re-sign with TNA.
Hmm. Wow. First, I'm hearing that. Abyss at that point was, from what I remember in TNA was pretty big. As far as credible opponents. So to
And
bring him in,
especially at a time when there was limited TNA WWE star crossover from TNA's end, because you wouldn't see TNA guys jump into WWE. You would see
no,
WWE guys jump to TNA.
main event month.
So having Abyss be a similar character, even being consideration for The Undertaker, would be massive.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And I think it would have been a credible opponent too. You know, I think you definitely could have built that matchup. Somebody brings in Abyss, as the guy who's going to end the streak. Oh yeah, that would definitely go through a couple weeks of TV where he destroys everybody. I think that would have worked.
And a couple of rumored opponents. I couldn't find the exact source of these, so take them with a grain of salt. One rumored opponent was Wade Barrett for WrestleMania
I've actually read
2001.
that. I've read that.
Yeah, yeah. So
Bad news. Bad news for you, Wade.
if it was Bad News Barrett, I'd feel a little bit different. But Wade Barrett at that time was still pretty new, pretty
Hmm.
great. So I'm not sure how he would be as an opponent for the Undertaker.
I can't see him beating the streak, but as Bully Ray always says, one man goes over and one man gets over. Just being in there with the Undertaker would have given credibility to Wade Barrett that he didn't have at that point in his career.
And another early name that was floated around when he was first getting started was Ted DiBiase Jr.
I wish Ted DiBiase Jr. would have stuck around a little longer.
I thought he was very solid.
I thought so too. I thought the whole group, the Legacy group, I thought with him and Cody and Randy, and if you remember, they even had Manu was in there at one point too.
And Sim Snuka.
Yes, I mean that was a great group of second generational talent. I would have loved to see Ted DiBiase Jr. again. Doesn't have to get the victory, But you have a link in that match is that Ted DiBiase is the one who brought the Undertaker in at Survivor Series in 1990, and now here we are. Fast forward, 20 years later or whatever it is, and here's his son, trying to make a name for himself. He calls out the Undertaker. Doesn't have to go over, but he's gonna get over his, and it's gonna be, just the fact that he hung in there with the Undertaker is gonna give him, you know, some notoriety.
Now, we went through the worst that the streak had to offer. What about the best? What do you consider the best story, the best match of the Undertaker streak?
So I've actually been fearing you asking this one because I there's so many you could obviously the Shawn Michaels with the retirement story I think is phenomenal. You
Hmm.
know, um, the
Probably
tr-
my favorite video package. I know
yes,
people like to say Rock Austin, but
no.
this one
Well,
is far
first of all,
superior in my opinion.
nobody beats WWE at WrestleMania with their video packages.
Oh
And
yeah,
they're on
their
a level.
production value is great.
Yes, back to back years with Triple H, or I should say Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Triple H. I mean, those are 4 years of just amazing matches and story. How each year the story built off the year before.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Shawn Michaels, and he comes back because I got to beat the Undertaker, and if I can't beat the Undertaker, I'm going to retire. And then Triple H's turn to avenge his friend, and then they get to the Hell in the Cell, and now Shawn's involved as the guest referee. I mean, those stories were great. Obviously, the original story with Kane when he first came in, and how, if you remember, the Undertaker didn't want to put his hands on his baby brother. I mean, so that was a pretty. That might have been actually out of all the matches, I think that one with Kane might have been the first to actually have a real story. 'Cause, I mean, there was a little bit of a story with Jake the Snake, with the whole, with the incident in the funeral parlor and all.
Yeah, and the Diesel one was the story was Diesel cost Taker the championship,
Yes,
Taker cost Diesel the championship. That was pretty much the extent of the Undertaker stories at that point.
right. I mean, even like I said, even Edge and his mini streak versus Undertaker's actual streak, but those weren't real stories. Those are more for the title. Um, I'm gonna say, other than those Triple H Shawn Michaels matches, I think the only other one that had really, really good story, CM Punk with the whole with the tie-in with Paul Bearer. I think that was pretty good too. But by then the streak's over. Or it's not over yet. It still has another year, but still, you know,
It was a complete opposite story from the Shawn Michaels Triple H
yes,
ones because with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, it was the honorable way of trying to
yes,
beat the Undertaker streak. CM Punk, by hook or by crook, he wanted to beat the streak. It doesn't matter if it's by a disqualification, doesn't
correct.
matter by count out.
He's
He
in.
wants the streak and going personal with the Undertaker with the attacks.
Right, yes,
That
and
was
it
it.
was right after the death of Paul Bearer too.
I'm going to put you on the spot again, Seth.
All right, do it.
You can choose three Undertaker WrestleMania matches. It could be the ones he lost to, it could be the ones post streak. Three Undertaker matches at WrestleMania. You can only view those for the rest of the time of his streak. What are they?
And these are the only three matches that are going to be in my queue, and I can only watch these three matches forever. The other ones are all lost.
The other ones are lost. Peacock is not working for those. You can only use and view those three matches.
Okay, all right.
And I'll
Um,
do mine once you're good.
Undertaker and Triple H one from WrestleMania 17 is in there
Okay.
because, again, out of the three matches, that was my favorite of them, and there wasn't even a storyline built other than the fact that they were fighting for the yard.
Hmm.
All right, so I'm definitely going in there. I'm gonna put the Undertaker Shawn Michaels, the second one, the one where he retires HBK.
Hmm.
I'm putting that in there. That was a classic. Do I put Undertaker and Brock in there?
Hmm.
Do I put Undertaker and Brock in there?
See,
Do I,
it's always the first two that are easy. It's the
yes.
third one that
Now
gets
it's
you.
like, ooh, wait a second. I mean, not for nothing. That match with Edge was a pretty good match too. Um, the Ric Flair match was a good match too.
Batista's was a good match.
Batista was a good match.
AJ, even though cinematic was a good
Yeah,
match.
I so wish, if we don't have COVID-19 that year, that match had such that the potential of that match was so good.
Yeah, it would have skyrocketed.
Yeah, imagine. I mean, here he is. It's Tampa Bay, and he comes out as the American Badass. To take on AJ Styles.
Hmm.
Who had just called him, Mark
Mark,
Calloway in their promo. I mean, dude, he was going to kick his ass.
what a direction that turned too.
Yeah. Whew. All right, I'm going with the Brock Undertaker. Brock is the third one, just
Okay.
because we have, two matches at the peak of the streak, and then the final match of the
Hmm.
streak.
All right, it's my go.
Did we agree on any of the three?
So you got one of mine,
Okay.
and it's the Shawn Michaels one,
Okay. I
the
think it's a
sequel.
classic.
I have to go with the first Shawn Michaels one too,
Okay.
just because it's the
Classic.
complete book. It's the bookend of the story,
Yeah.
And then the third one, it's always the one it's the one that gets you.
Hmm.
Uh, I think I'm going with Batista. I'm going with Batista.
You didn't want to go with King Kong Bundy.
No, no, shockingly,
Yeah. Huh.
didn't want to do it with this one. I think it was the perfect of the veteran and the new powerhouse of Batista. And it's a shame that Batista didn't stick around
Yeah.
as long as he did, but he's killing it in Hollywood.
Not for
And
nothing. I mean, that was a championship match too, if I remember right. Didn't
yes, it was. Yeah.
So I mean, not only it was the streak versus the championship, and
Hmm.
Undertaker walked away with the championship. I mean, that was to me that's a tremendous match because you know again you seen her going. Maybe there's a chance. Maybe Batista wins.
And Batista was also undefeated at that time in
Yeah.
WrestleMania too. Two
I mean,
wins, but still,
but
it's
still, I
undefeated.
mean, look who he beat. I mean, look at the credibility. I mean, he had victory over Triple H. For a
And,
championship.
and The Rock and Mick Foley.
Yeah. I mean, he was in there with the guy's been in there with Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers. I believed at the time that there was a chance Batista could win.
When you think of accomplishments or things in WWE / wrestling history, where does the streak rank among the greatest things for you?
I think the streak is iconic. I think, you know, we're not, WrestleMania and WrestleMania. Listen, WrestleMania is its own thing, right? It's the greatest spectacle in sports entertainment there is. It brings in people who are the casual fans, and it brings in people who watch it religiously. But you take the streak out of that, and you just look at all those iconic moments that are gone. So the streak is definitely has its own place in history. I mean, I would make an argument. I mean, listen, Undertaker's already in the Hall of Fame, but I mean, if they ever start booking moments, and matches in the Hall of Fame, I put in the entire streak in the Hall of Fame. I think the streak is Hall of Fame worthy on its own. I
I
think
couldn't have said it better myself.
you
Yeah.
know the streak's bigger than the Undertaker at this point.
That's going to do it for this episode of Wrestling Retold and Relive. Seth, is there anything you want to plug? Any Twitters, any Instagrams?
Richie, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. I can't wait to come back and do this again sometime with you. Um,
Absolutely. You
I
always
don't.
have an open invite with me.
I appreciate it, man. We'll definitely we're gonna touch base because I think we talked before about a couple of different ideas we have for some future shows too. So
Absolutely.
it was great.
And
It was great being here, and again, thank you for having me.
anytime, Seth. Now, again, you could always follow us on the Instagram and the Twitter at Retold Richie Mars. You could follow me on TikTok where I do wrestling content at One True Richie. And again, you could download these episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And new episodes come out every Tuesday. See you next time, same podcast channel, TTFN. Ta ta for now.